Hello, everyone, and we are so glad that you're here with us. We apologize for the delay. We did have a little bit of internet difficulty, but now we're back up. So we're so happy because we know that we have a special program that should be presented today, and it is for our teens and our children, and it's on our teens and our children. So we are just glad that God worked everything out, and we are streaming live right now. And so once again, we'd like to welcome you and to our third session for our World Mental Health Day. And we will have with us again Dr. Torben Berglin, and he was our speaker just earlier this morning, and we are going to hear from him again. But before we start, let us have a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we are so thankful that you were able to work this internet issue out. We know that you have something special in store for us, and so we pray that you will work everything out for your name's honor and glory, and that we will all be blessed, and that those who need to be present will be present. Please be with our doctor as he presents, and may your Holy Spirit rest upon him so that he will speak only your words for your honor and your glory. We thank you and we praise you in your Son's name. Amen. One thing that I do want to say is before we move on is make sure that you're writing your questions down so that during our question and our answer period, we can get right into it so that we can answer your questions for you.
Greetings, I am Dennis Ramirez, and I chose the challenge of hugging your family member or loved one at least every day. I realized that hugging your loved one or your family member makes us happier. Naturally, our body releases a certain hormone that affects our brain. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel loved and cared for. And so, as I hug my wife and my daughter, before our morning worship, and even before we sleep at night, it creates a sense of bond in our family. It strengthens our relationship with my wife and with my daughter. And so as a part of mental health, I encourage you, mothers, fathers, even our youth, to maximize the benefit of hugging your family member and your loved one. And so do we, as a family, we continue challenging ourselves to apply this act. May God bless you. Thank you.
So now again is our introduction of our speaker. For those of you who were not present with us this morning, I am just going to introduce him one more time so that you can get a good feel of his background and know who's speaking to us. So our speaker this afternoon is Dr. Torben Berglin. He is one of the Associate Directors of Health Ministries Department for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the General Conference. He is originally from Norway and comes from a pastoral family. As a lay member, he has served as a youth director, Sabbath school leader, and he is an ordained elder. Dr. Berglin holds his medical degree from Copenhagen University in Denmark. He did his residency in psychiatry at Modum Bad Clinic, Oslo University Hospital, and Vestviken Hospitals in Norway. He trained as a psychotherapist at the Institute of Psychotherapy in Oslo, Norway. As a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist, he takes a special interest in working with patients with depression, anxiety, and personality disorders, as well as integrating relational, religious, and existential perspectives in his therapy. He served as chair of the depression department at Modum Bad in Norway, a hospital run by a Christian foundation that specializes in psychotherapeutic treatment and research. In 2015, he accepted the call to be the Health Ministries Director of the Trans-European Division in England. And in 2018, he transferred to the General Conference as Associate Director with a special emphasis on mental health and the health and well-being of church workers. He considers it a great privilege to serve God and the church through the gifts that God has given him. He enjoys and prioritizes his family and friends. He is a cyclist, runner, skier, and a mountain climber. Let us please welcome Dr. Berglin.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm happy that I can be with you live. Was sorry I couldn't be with you live, or chose not to be with you live this morning. I'm sorry if I said now good morning. It's just getting light outside here at my place, but I know it's the afternoon for you. But I chose to prioritize to get some sleep. 3 a.m. is not a time of the night where my brain works well, so I thought it was better that I sleep and do a pre-recorded, but now I can be with you live. And again, I want to really appreciate that you have chosen to have this celebration of World Mental Health Day this weekend. It's so important, and for me as a psychiatrist, I think this is so good that we as people, as a church, can acknowledge that mental health is so important. The World Health Organization has said it very clearly that without mental health, there is no health. That's quite strong statement, but I think most of us will recognize that sort of it doesn't, like, if we don't have good mental health, we often struggle to enjoy and engage with life and with people and whatever is around us. So even like the perfect health, if you have the perfect job or lots of money or anything, if you don't have mental health, you will struggle to enjoy life, and that's why it's so important. And I'm also very pleased that you chose to focus on kids and teens. I will, as we talk today, I will have that especially in mind. How we relate this, but still, like, mental health, it is relevant to all of us, and I think wherever you are at stage in life, and whether you have kids, teens, young adults, or you are in that group, or you know someone, I hope this can be relevant. So I will share my screen with you. So sorry, that was the wrong screen. There it is. This is what will be the focus for this talk. Mental health and well-being for children and teens. And I would like to start with just a couple of quotes. Some of you may be familiar with Ellen White, who was one of the leading Adventists in the early days, has been very influential. She wrote a lot about health. And one of her books, which really is called The Ministry of Healing, it's really a good book, not only about health, but really about how to live life. This is a quote from page 143. where she says, there is a need of coming close to people by personal effort. If less time were given to sermonizing and more time were spent in personal ministry, greater results would be seen. The poor are to be relieved, the sick cared for, the sorrowing and the bereaved comforted, the ignorant instructed, the inexperienced counseled. We are to weep with those that weep and rejoice with those that rejoice, accompanied by the power of persuasion, the power of prayer, the power of the love of God. This work will not, cannot be without fruit. This is, I think, a very important statement on the challenges that we are facing and what's important that we have our focus on. There are so many people in this world who are struggling, and as individuals, as communities, as people, it is so important that we really engage with people and their lives, and especially also with the young people among us. What we know is that young people especially are vulnerable when it comes to mental health issues. And I will show you something later to also indicate that how it is, how common mental health issues is among young people. Then she also writes in one of the other important books, major works that she wrote, a book called Patriarchs and Prophets. And that's a book that is talking about the history, early history from the Bible, from the Old Testament, the people there, what we call patriarchs and the prophets. And she says, we are all woven together in the great web of humanity, and whatever we can do to benefit and uplift others will reflect in blessings upon ourselves. The law of mutual dependence run through all classes of society. And especially this statement that I really appreciate, we are all woven together in the great web of humanity. What happens to one affects the other, and it is the concern of someone else. If people around us are struggling, are suffering, that is our concern. And whenever we can help one another, there is this promise, and we know that also very much it will help ourselves. And that's also what we very much know from research, is that one of the best things we can do if we ourselves are struggling also is to help others, to change the focus like from ourselves and to others. That's what often happens in mental illness, is that our world sort of shrinks very much. And that's because like we're trying to survive, we're struggling, we're suffering. And then what can happen easily, and I'm not saying this as any kind of criticism, it's just the mechanism, how things are when people are struggling. That's what happens to all of us, that oftentimes like we become self-focused. And it's not, that's not meant in critical in any way, but that's just a natural thing. We all know sort of if we're sick, if we're not feeling well, we become very sensitive to what's going on in ourselves. And that's what also happens very much in mental illness, because the symptoms are so strong. But what is very beneficial, what is very helpful, is whenever we can somehow also do something that helps us engage and focus also on the bigger world out there, and especially other people. The World Mental Health Organization, they made this statement in the Mental Health Action Plan that went until 2020, and it's now been extended to 2030. We have not reached all the goals that we wanted, and this is a continual process. But they say, and I like this definition of mental health, and they also focus especially on children, what's important to be aware of. And they say mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities or potentials, we could also say, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. That's the general statement. What we will notice, like for regardless of age, what we will notice here, there's no talk about symptoms. We don't define mental health as something where there's an absence of any kind of emotional, cognitive symptoms. And that's because we all have them. And at times we do feel distressed, we feel negative emotions. This is normal. This is part of life in the world as we live. So we're not seeking and should not be seeking to just not feel anything negative or not have any kinds of symptoms at any time. We will experience that. But the core thing is that we're able to function, that we can enjoy life, and that we can be part of the community, both receiving from the community and giving something to the community. When it then comes to children, what are very important things and aspects? And here it says, with respect to children, an emphasis is placed on developmental aspects. For instance, having a positive sense of identity, an understanding of who am I, and having a self-image that is positive. That is important to develop that, a realistic, not exaggerated, not inflated self-image. That's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for the picture-perfect social media kind of image, but a realistic, real image. And again, our identity, who we see ourselves as, and that's so important when we're talking about children and young adults. Very much who we see ourselves as is very much about how other people see us. What is communicated to us about our worth, our value, that we are appreciated. And again, we come back to the issue of love. Love is the cornerstone, it's the platform on how we build good mental health, regardless of age, but especially when it comes to children. Being loved, being cared for, being appreciated is essential for children to have a good mental health and good development. Other aspects for children, the ability to manage thoughts, emotions, as well as to build social relationships within the family and relationships outside the family. And here, many children and young adults have been really challenged during this pandemic with the restrictions, not being able to engage socially as would be normal and as is needed in order to develop. And the impact of what will be the impact of that, only time will tell. We know that, again, children, youth, teenagers, teens, young adults have been especially hard impacted on the emotional level by this pandemic and the restrictions on life that has been necessary, but still have not been beneficial to our emotional and social relational needs. And this is something to be very much aware of. Beyond that, children need aptitude to learn and acquire education. Education is very important. Education is not, in my view, it's not primarily about acquiring knowledge, but it's developing a developing of the mind, of the thinking, how one sees the world, how one sees oneself. And this is very important. So knowledge is important, but the process, the growth, the personal growth that comes through good education is invaluable. And if you have the opportunity, prioritize giving your children, your teens, your young adults good education. Very important. And ultimately enabling them their full active participation in society. That's what we want. We are social creatures. We need to be part of community, of society, if we are going to do well. Some statistics and the perspectives also here from the United Nations. They said, like, before COVID-19, this was a report published in May 2020, discussing the challenges that the pandemic especially have caused. And in general, around the world, we estimate that around 1 billion people, 1 in 8 approximately around the world, is suffering from some kind of mental disorder this very moment. That's a lot of people, and that basically means they are suffering on the level where they ought to have professional help and care. Beyond that, many people are struggling in various ways, sort of where they need support. They may not be on the level, it may not be on the level where they actually need treatment for it. But lots of people around the world, 1 billion, actually would be, according to how we understand it, in need of treatment. Sadly, only a fraction get it. And even among those who get some kind of treatment, many don't get enough or appropriate treatment. So this is a huge health challenge that we have in the world. And that would be my what I would urge you, especially when it comes to the young among us, if they are struggling. Don't delay, don't wait, don't just see, well, let's just see if this passes. If things go on for weeks, if it goes on for months, whatever help is available, make use of it. It's the very good investment in the growth and development. And also for all of us, if we are struggling, our lives are valuable. So let's take care of them, let's invest in them, and let's get help when we are struggling. That's why we have community. We need other people. So the most common mental health disorders, anxiety and depression, about 300 million of each. And the sad statistics is also that too many people choose to die because they are struggling. There's about 800,000 suicides globally each year, and this is around the world. In principle, every suicide is preventable. People don't have to die because of suicide, but people choose that way out of life sometimes, and it's usually because in some way or another they are suffering too much. They are in too much pain. And there's a lot of stigma also in religious context, both Christian and probably Muslim context also. We've looked very negatively traditionally on people who choose to die by suicide. But I am sure that every time that happens, God is crying. God is suffering with the one who suffers so much that they just can't bear the thought of living anymore. And sadly, suicide is a leading cause of death among young people globally in the age group 15 to 29. suicide is the second leading cause of death globally, second leading cause of death. And you may then wonder, what's the leading cause? It's not a physical illness. It's not cancer. It's none of these things. Accidents is the leading cause of death in young people. And then sadly, number 2 is suicide. And that's why it needs to be taken very seriously whenever someone expresses thoughts or have ideas about death or suicide. It needs to be taken seriously. We know that around half of all mental health conditions start by the age of 14. So among those who are going to will at some point in life struggle with mental health issues, around half of them already struggle before they're 14. And that's why it's important to catch this early. The earlier we catch it, the earlier we are able to provide appropriate support, the better the chances are that people can get through it, can be able to manage it, so they don't have to suffer as much later on in life. What we know that the severe mental health conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, severe depression, it affects lifespan. People with these severe conditions, they generally live 10 to 20 years shorter than the general population for a variety of reasons, but it's really serious. And the question is then, what does this look like for Northern Africa and Middle East region? I didn't pick, this is some database that is sort of the most recognized for around the world on what we call the epidemiology, difficult word, but like how common various kinds of health issues are. And I just picked out this that covers this region. I know these are more countries than maybe you are belong to, but still, this is how common it is, and this gives a profile of how many people struggle with, depending on their age. You can see the age categories here: 5 to 9 years old, 10 to 14-year-old, 15, 19, all through until old age. And what you'll see, this very interesting curve, that it spikes, it really rises here to high numbers very early on in life. This is how many people are suffering out of 100,000. So this 20K means 20,000 out of the 100,000. And if you do some quick math in your head, 20,000 of 100,000, that's 20% of everyone in this age group. And what you will see here then, as people get into 10 to 14, like children, 10 to 14 years, transitioning into teenage years, 15 to 19, it's really rises rapidly. So this means like almost 20% at this age are struggling. And this continues then through young adulthood and then starts to decline. The good news about mental health is that we tend to get it tends to get better the older we get, in a way. And I think that's very much like a maturing process that we'll learn how to manage things. But it's a very challenging phase of life, the teenage years, young adulthood years, very challenging, and many people struggle. And in your region, your part of the world, about 1 in 5 of children, teens, young adults will be struggling actually with a mental health disorder. You probably can't see it on them. You may not be able to if you just know them at casually, a bit distance, you may not be able to identify it. But that is the case. Mental illness struggles are often quite invisible to others, but it still causes significant suffering. And this pattern is pretty much the same around all the world. This is part of being human, and there's no part of the world really where they are not struggling, people are not struggling with mental health issues. Some countries you would find the numbers a bit higher, some maybe a bit lower, but still the pattern is the same. So this is relevant all around the world. And a question then, what should we be on the lookout for in ourselves and in others, and especially children, teens, young adults? And this is sort of a quite comprehensive list. Some of these things may be like visible to us from the outside. Some of the things are more on the inside. And this is in general, but very applicable also to children, teens, young adults. When people struggle with excessive worrying and fear, and that may be sort of expressed at sort of constantly thinking about things, worrying what may happen. Can be specific things people are struggling with, or it can be sort of more general. These can be signs of anxiety, and again, anxiety is very, very common. Another thing, feeling excessively sad or low, symptoms of depression. Again, we're talking like about feelings, but sometimes we get the sense when we interact with people also that maybe they are feeling like this. The challenge with children, teens also, and young adults, to some extent young adults also, is that our ability to express verbally what's going on may not be fully developed yet. Even though, of course, we can talk, can speak, so we're not talking about that. But the ability to think about feelings, that is something that take time to develop. And that's where we need the help of one another in our discussion about what's going on, what are we feeling. That is something where we need the help of others, as when children, teens are young, to make sense, to understand what's going on. They have the feelings, but how to communicate about them may be a challenge, and that's where it's important to be able to talk about these things. Other challenges: confused thinking, problems concentrating and learning. That may be something that is challenge and can be sort of observable also from the outside, and can be sort of an indication of various things that can be a challenge. Extreme mood changes, being highs, even this being excessively happy, energetic, driven, that can also be an indication that something actually, it's too much of what in a way could be a good thing. Sort of, we're not talking about being sort of briefly excited, but if sort of someone is too high, and this is what we can be wondering then about, can it be some kind of bipolar disorder? And bipolar disorder can sort of manifest itself quite early on. Prolonged or strong feelings of irritability or anger, that's something that especially we can observe in children, that they can be irritable, grumpy, angry, outbursts that are excessive to the situation. When that happens, whenever there's an emotional expression or reaction that sort of goes beyond what seems sort of reasonable in the context, in the situation, that's where we need to think what's behind this, what's underlying this, what is going on. Don't criticize or punish the child or the teen for excessive reactions, because there's a reason. We have this saying in where I come from, Scandinavia, something is the tip of the iceberg. It makes maybe more sense for us because we are more familiar with icebergs. Your part of the world, you don't probably see that many icebergs going around, but the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, means because of the properties of ice, that the tip of the iceberg is only 10% of the iceberg. Underneath the water is where really the big iceberg is. And that's often when we interact with people, what we often see is the tip of the iceberg. Underneath, inside, there's usually much more going on, and we need to be sensitive, caring, and supportive of what's underneath what we are seeing, and be interested, be curious about what is this that is going on. Another thing, when you see someone avoiding friends or social activities, that's not a good sign. Again, it's so important thing that we are engaged in social activities. We need other people, and especially children, young adults, if they start to withdraw from other people, that's also a reason to wonder what's going on. Are they struggling in some way? Other issues can have difficulties understanding or relating to other people. Some of even can be that they develop mentally, or their brain is not functioning that well. For example, autism spectrum disorders, where they don't process what's going on between us or between people in the same way. The brain just doesn't function normally and process and understand things the way most people understand things. And that's something that can be hard to change, can be impossible to change, but again, can be managed. And can need with support, hopefully can optimize so it can function as well as possible. Sleeping habits, feeling tired, low energy is something that is important. Changes in eating habits, whether there's increased hunger or lack of appetite, not wanting to eat, like these very basic functions relating to other people, sleeping, how we eat, and also sex drive, more general, when we see changes in these basic functions, they are also indications, can be indications that something is going on with on regard to mental health. Another issue is when people struggle perceiving reality, where they experience things very differently from what most would do. That can also be a sign that there is some problem, typically with issues with schizophrenia, psychotic disorders, then just a whole interpretation that they experience, the brain experiences reality differently from what most of us do, and they can distort reality. And again, not something that is a choice, not something that are in control of themselves, but they need support and help, and there's often good treatments for this. Then if someone struggles with like inability to perceive one's own feelings, behavior, and personality, like not being in touch with oneself, that can also be a challenge. Use of alcohol, drugs, or any kind of addiction is usually an indication that there is some kind of pain, some struggle that they're trying to manage somehow with these kinds of behavior. And then again, doesn't really help just to focus on the tip of the iceberg, the addiction, the use of alcohol or drugs, but we need to understand like what's underneath, what's going on, what is the root problem here that we need to deal with. Then if there are struggle, and this is typical with children and young adults, since they cannot necessarily think or talk about emotions, and what's going on, often it will be felt in the body in some shape or form and will be expressed as such also. This should always be taken seriously. We shouldn't just dismiss it as something that is caused by emotions. It is as important as if there is a physical condition that is behind it. So whenever someone is struggling with headaches, can be stomach problems, aches or pains, or any kinds of physical reaction. And we even know that when people are often underlying many of the mental illnesses is some kind of stress, some kind of chronic stress. And chronic stress often manifests itself and impacts the body very much. It's not healthy to be in a chronic stress situation. And oftentimes at the core of many of the mental health challenges we face is some kind of emotional stress, relational stress, or physical stress. Can be lifestyle related or other things. So this is important to take seriously. Whenever someone is thinking or expressing or having some kind of behavior that's related to death or suicide, that is always something that is important to recognize and to talk about. One important thing is like you don't make things worse by talking about that. And if you get the sense that someone is struggling mentally, you can almost take for granted that they are also having thoughts, or you should suspect that they also may have thoughts of death or suicide. When I worked as a psychiatrist clinically with patients, I would always ask every patient about if they had thoughts about death or suicide. And it was the exception that they did not in any way, shape, or form have that. Many of us, when been experience difficult things, we're looking for some kind of way out, some kind of escape. And that's what suicide essentially is. It is not a good solution. It's not a good escape. It's good to any problems, but it is still a potential way to escape the pain, the suffering that people may experience. And that's why it is so important that we talk about it and we are proactive about it. It's a very painful and lonely thing to have these kind of thoughts, and it often is felt very shameful to talk about it, but it is important to talk about it. And if you talk about it in a supportive, non-judgmental, non-critical way, you won't make things worse. On the contrary, you will make things better. Other indication that some may be struggling is the inability to carry out daily activities, to handle daily problems and stress, not functioning well. That's an indication. Also can be an indication that something may be going on the mental health issue in terms of mental health. And then people, another thing, fear of weight gain, concern with appearance, body image issues, which are quite common. And both men and women, boys and girls have this, but even more common, especially among girls and young women may struggle with these issues. And eating disorders may be one of the issues where we can have this. I had a couple of videos that I thought maybe I would share, but I will skip them because of time, and it also may not work that well over the internet when it's been streamed like this. But I will mention that later. We are developing a series of videos now on mental health by the church that will start releasing early next year. And so this was a preview. If you have more time at the end, I can, and you want to see it, we can go back and see it. briefly about treatments. What do we do and what have we done? The problem before in old days, often we would see mental health issues as either caused by moral problems or spiritual supernatural problems. And I'm not saying these never play a role in it, but it's not in many cases the appropriate way to see and to deal with mental health issues. And that's important that we don't just say to people that if they're struggling, they don't have enough faith, or it's because they're doing the wrong things, or not living the life the way they should be living it. That's not helpful. There may always be things we all can change, but don't that shouldn't be the first place we go. What happened in the 19th and 20th century that we got a more biological focus on mental health issues. We understood that it's related to the brain, the nervous system. There's something going on physically when we have mental health issues, and we need to focus on that. Sometimes, or maybe we've sort of gone to the other extreme, sometimes that it's sort of only treated as a biological, physical problem. And that's not a good way either to deal with it. We are complex. The physical, the mental, the social, the spiritual, all is connected, and we need to deal with all these aspects if we're going to really help people. What came in the early 20th century is more the various kind of talking cures, psychotherapies, which have been very important. Psychoanalysis was one. Another one is cognitive therapy, and there are many different schools and traditions. There's no one that is the one and only and the best. And many of these are good depending on the problems, depending on the situation. And here I would encourage, as a Christian community, and I think sometimes in religion in general, there's been some kind of uncomfortable relationship between the talking cures, psychotherapies, and the religious community. We know some of the forefathers, for example, in psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, also some of the key people in cognitive therapy, which is sort of a different tradition. They actually were very vocal and critical about religion. And that's why many Christians and religious people feel that sort of it's not safe to go into any kind of psychotherapy because we feel we're going to be attacked. I'm trained myself as a psychotherapist, and as a Christian, I've been very comfortable going into this because I feel that psychotherapy, those traditions have matured. They now appreciate that spirituality, religion is an important life and essential for many people in their lives. And a good psychotherapist, a good therapist, a good counselor should be respectful, appreciative, and supportive of also the spiritual religious dimension of the life of the patient. If they're not, then you should look for someone else. Probably sometimes we need to be challenged. And as I talked about in this morning, we also, spirituality can have some unhealthy traits at times. And I've worked a lot with that with patients. I'm a Christian myself, an Adventist myself. I believe in this, but still I've had to challenge patients sometimes when the way they think about religion, the way they think about faith, the way they practice it is clearly some way being harmful to them. And that's why our traditions, or our faith traditions, they are not perfect. So they need at times to be challenged. But it's important still to understand that even if we get sometimes critical or curious questions, we should be willing and able to talk about that. Many people who are Christian, who maybe are religious, would prefer to have a therapist who shares their faith tradition, and that's can be absolutely appropriate, and being a good way to do that. But I still would not discourage to even seek a therapy, depending on what the problem is, to even have a therapist who is not a believer. But if you're not comfortable with this, if your faith, if your beliefs is not treated with respect, then it's probably not the right therapy relationship that you should be in. And then it's okay to change and to seek someone else. Then brain stimulation therapies, when people are struggling a lot, that's something that's been, we have what we call like electroshock ECT, which has been with us for many years, has to some extent had a bad reputation, can be very effective for some people. It can be for some people the only thing that works, but it's sort of a last resource. And we have now developed other techniques also now that are less dramatic, less invasive, that also can be used. Then it's medication. And we have various kinds of medication also for mental health illnesses. But I would say, like in general, medication alone is seldom sufficient and appropriate treatment for any kind of mental health illness. Mental health illness, it affects many of the aspects of our lives. And medication can be a necessary part of that. What is important to say is that these medications, they sometimes work very well for some people. For other people, they may not work very well. Sometimes we have to try different kinds of medication before actually find something that works for the individual. This is very individual, and even like the best psychiatrists, we cannot predict how an individual patient will respond to a medication. We have thoughts, we have hopes, but it becomes evident when we try it. For most of these medications, they don't cause any long-term harm. They can, if it doesn't work, it can always be stopped, and we can sort of quit medication. But if you are recommended by or your child is recommended to try medication, I think my recommendation would be open to it, but give it time and then carefully evaluate how it works. If it doesn't work, one shouldn't use medication. As a psychiatrist, I probably in my practice have taken many more patients off medication than I've put on medication, but still for certain conditions, it can definitely be worth trying. And then the big one, which to still today haven't been given sufficient and appropriate attention within psychology, psychiatry, I think it's the aspect of lifestyle, which is so important. We are quite good on the therapies, we're quite good on medication, but there's so many things when it comes to lifestyle where we really can make a difference and can help people. And I have written an article And I see, because of time, I won't be able to go through everything, but I would recommend, if you are interested in the lifestyle aspect, to read this article. It's published on the website Adventist Review. It's one of these journals, magazines that the Adventist Church publishes globally. And I recommend to read that. I will go through several, like some of the aspects, and just some highlights there. Why is mental health and lifestyle so important? And it's important because lifestyle doesn't just impact how long we live, but also how well we live. Lifestyle is very much about the quality of life today and tomorrow. It's not about having a longer life, but it's also having a better life here and now. And that's what is so important. We want the best quality of life for ourselves and others, and be able to achieve and do what we want. Important thing is that a healthful, balanced lifestyle is in no way a guarantee against physical or mental illness, but it increases our chances of enjoying more years of health and happiness. And that's also important to say now in the time that we're living with this pandemic, the COVID-19. People are struggling, wonder how can we manage the best way possible. And lifestyle is very important in that. But again, even the perfect lifestyle, even if you're young, that's no guarantee that you will not be impacted and won't get sick if you are infected with this virus. And that's why our recommendation is do all the things that can protect you and protect others from this illness. Practice a good lifestyle, but also follow the advice that is given and receive the best kind of treatment and prevention strategies that modern medicine provides. That is a strong recommendations. And what I would say, sometimes when we talk about lifestyle, we sometimes think more about our physical health, but truly lifestyle is as important for the mind as it is for the body. And in the article that I referenced, I highlight the importance of sleep, the importance of exercise, the importance of nutrition, and the importance of relationships for good mental health. And all these are very important things. And I start with sleep also because that's one of the most important things. It's sort of the foundation. Like if we don't get enough sleep, and this is a big problem, especially for kids and young adults, teens, because many of them have a sleep pattern that is pretty much like the adult sleep pattern. Children, teens need more sleep, significantly more sleep than adults need if they're going to function well. If they don't get it, then we all know, like, kids become grumpy, they become irritable, problems with their behavior, and that's not because they're bad kids, but often because they are sleep deprived. It leads to so many challenges, and it's because their brain and their body is not functioning well. And we may think that, well, we as adults, we don't behave like that, but well, in many ways we do, maybe better at hiding what's going on, but as adults also we also need good quality sleep. Exercise, movement is very important, and it's a challenge now. Many spend much time inside, being passive, using screens. Our bodies are made to move, and for children, young adults, if they don't move enough, if we don't have physical activity, then the brain doesn't develop as it should. Nutrition, very important. Balanced diet. Eat as much as you can from as close to what God created: fruits, vegetables, legumes, beans. These should be the main things that we put in. And then relationships is so important. So I think I'll stop sharing the screen now, and we can have some discussion. If you have any questions, things that we can share, talk about. I don't have the answer to all questions, but I'd be happy to, if there are any questions or things you want to discuss, or if there's something more, I have more slides, I can share more depending on what you would like and prefer. So I gave the word back to the media team.
And now we're going to just have our video challenge before we get to our questions. So for those of you who have questions for the doctor, please get those questions in. But right now, we did present you with a challenge for the golf field. You know, we talked about being thankful, hugs, suicide awareness, depression. We talked about many things that we can do to increase our positive mental health. And so I want to share that there are several churches that did upload their videos of what they've done. And I want to recognize Dubai Creek side for presenting, for Dubai Central for presenting. I also want to thank the Qatar youth professionals. They did an actual presentation on discussing depression and mental health. And so now we're just going to see a small snippet of what they were able to do. And I also want to thank Brother Dennis for his part as well. And so now we're going to take a look at the video, and then after that, we're going to work on our question and answers.
It's like there's a small voice telling me that my daughter
will help me cope with my depression. I turn it, the negative into, my energy into positive. He that controls his emotions or his self, discipline is better than the kings who conquer cities.
It's enough time to get insane.
Yeah.
So they reached out to me.
Will men understand women this time? Because we also have the stigma. If men have the stigma, women have the stigma. When we talk about coping mechanisms, we may resort first in the maladaptive coping mechanisms, the negative. But then we to share to someone, especially I consider myself that strong, independent woman nowadays. The 2020
It's best to know the leaders. Yeah. Once you're in the bout of
Hi, I'm Mark from Dubai Central Church Health Ministry Department. On behalf of AY Ministry and Men's Create Ministry, we accept the challenge for sending the appreciation notes for our church members in Center celebration of mental health awareness. Thank you.
So, an appreciation note that I received today from the Help Unit goes a long way with your mental health. So, with that, later on, you will receive an appreciation note. And for next month, we invite you to be there to join us for the mental health awareness.
And good morning and happy Sabbath, everyone. So we took part of the mental health challenge. When we talk and we have some conversation before going to sleep, phone should not be there, right? Especially when we also have our quality time with Jesus.
And I would like to share with you the two things that I've chosen with regards to this mental health challenge that we have. And that is option number one, is making a notebook or writing down all the blessings that I have on a daily basis for the next 10 days, and also getting hugs on a daily basis. With regards to what I have noticed in the option one, it gives me a sense of security to think that the blessing that I am receiving on a daily basis is innumerable. Actually, it's beyond what is the requirement. Just merely looking every day, one by one, on the things that I have received on a daily basis. Number one is being able to wake up in the morning is a big blessing already. It's an opportunity to live another day and to be a blessing to other people. And that's only one of so many things that I am receiving on a daily basis. And number two, seeing my family is another big blessing to me on a daily basis, that they are well and healthy. That's a very big blessing to me. And the list goes on and on. And with regards to the hugs, actually that is something that makes me feel very secured. Because on a daily basis, even without this health challenge, I really get hugs on a daily basis with my kids and my husband. So, and I'm getting not only once, twice in a day, it's like I'm getting so many in a day, apart from the loving words that they say. And I pray that you will have the same blessing of knowing that people love you and people cares for you. I would like to say thank you for making me a part of this challenge. May you all be blessed. Have a good day.
I am Apple, and I choose to write 10 blessings for 10 days. One of those blessings is this beautiful park that I walk on every single day going to work. It just reminds me how God is providing the small things that makes us happy every single day. And this music I hear from the birds singing and the fresh air, fresh breeze in the morning, just it delights me. It's just jumpstart the day. So there, have a good day, and always think that you are God's wonderful creation and you are blessed every single day.
A blessed day to everyone. I am Josie Acosta. I choose hug your family 5 times a day because I want them to feel my love and care. While hugging them, it reduces the loneliness and it is powerful enough to uplift their mood into unhappy to be happy. I am grateful that I am able to show them my love through hugging them. That's all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Connie Bonsa and I joined the Mental Health Challenge. I chose the one wherein I have to write all my blessings for 10 days. You know what? My anxiety level is too high since pandemic started. But then I realized I'm still blessed for a lot of reasons and that I do not need to worry too much. I noticed writing being alive and well as my number one blessing every day, and I appreciated my life and the lives of people around me even more. Being grateful helped my mental health as my anxiety level decreases. Knowing that as long as God is waking me up day by day, it means that I still have this chance to praise Him, I have this chance to love and care for the people around me, and to do my best in serving Him. Let's always remember that being grateful and being connected to God will be our one of our secret for us to have good mental health. Thank you.
So, Doctor, we are back. We have quite a few questions, so we're just going to get right into them, okay?
Okay.
So the first question that we have is, how can I speak to someone with a mental health problem like depression or anxiety?
Well, I think what is important is that we'd like to do it at the right time and place. When we're going to talk about sensitive things, like we often think we need to sit down, have enough time, do it in a way where it's clear that we are supportive and caring for the individual. And I've often said that if everyone had really good friends or family they could talk to, the need for therapists like myself would be much less, because it's really talking with people, going like in depth. That is what really can be beneficial. What is an important thing to just accept and learn is that it's not really about what you say to the person that is the most important thing. And this also has been challenging for us as therapists. We think that what we say is what makes the big difference. The big difference is what the person says. And the person can think about things, express things, and just in the process of talking, then the individual will often be able to think through things in a different way and come up with solutions for himself, herself. So don't think if someone is struggling, the most important thing you can do is to create and give them the opportunity to have just someone to think out loud with about what they're struggling. It's not you shouldn't take on sort of the role of thinking that you are going to solve the problem for the individual, because probably you can't. And that's if anyone should try to solve it, it should be probably more a mental health professional who takes on that responsibility, someone who is trained and can really be make those kind of assessments. But all of us, if we are just interested, if we are caring, if we are supportive, we can provide tremendous help to someone who is suffering. And the important thing is not what you say, the important thing is that you listen and that you are present with the individual in that situation. That's something all of us can do. And sometimes we need to be like proactive also. If you sense or are worried that someone is struggling with someone, be intentional about creating opportunities for that kind of talks. But if the person does not want to talk, be respectful of that also, unless there is really, you sense there's a danger that the person could harm themselves or maybe consider killing themselves. Then you need to do whatever you can to prevent that, especially when we're talking about someone who is at risk of suicide. Then we just need to do whatever we can to keep that person safe. But otherwise, sometimes people don't want to talk, and maybe they don't want to talk with you specifically, but they might be willing to talk with someone else, maybe for various reasons. And like as parents, also maybe sort of the child just not feel like it. Maybe they need to talk with someone else, and then be a facilitator so they can talk with someone that can provide good support and help. So it's there are many things to think about, but like if you're kind, if you are loving, if you are supportive and caring and respectful, you can't do much wrong, really. So that is important. Don't be shy about talking with someone.
And it sounds, Doctor, that it's also, like you're saying, to be present, right? Without the cell phone, without distractions, but you're focusing really on that individual.
Yeah. Don't have that conversation while you're watching TV. Like oftentimes what can be very good, and some people, they like what kind of context may differ also. Someone would maybe like to sit on the couch and talk about things. Someone would like to go for a walk, or would quite like to go out, like a neutral place, private, where they can be private. So like whatever kind of setting the individual is most comfortable with, that can be also important to be mindful. But definitely put away the phone, put it on mute, because that is like really being 100% present, giving full attention and listening very carefully to what is being said. And when you're listening, don't think about that, like, okay, what am I going to say next? Because that's not the important thing. Just being listening. If you should say something, if you need to say something, that will probably come up, but don't force it. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. As an Adventist, how can we best help those young people who have been hooked on drugs? What support can we best extend to them?
Yeah, very important thing. What I think with addictions in general, and regardless of age, it's not enough just to try to get rid of the addiction issue or that behavior. That is, of course, important. That's our goal. But we need to see that there's a bigger picture here. We need to understand what's underneath. Why are they doing this? Oftentimes, very often, with various kinds of addiction. Sorry, my Siri, my phone is thinks I'm talking to her. We need to oftentimes, when people get into addictions, the ones who get hooked on it, it's usually because they're trying to solve some kind of problem. And we're not going to solve the addiction problem if we don't solve the other problem that is underneath. And oftentimes it's related to mental health or relational health troubles that people are having in some kind of way. So we need to deal with that. We need to get that to the surface. What is the pain that they're trying to get rid of through the addiction? That is important. Then the other thing that I think is important is that we need to replace the addiction with something better. Something that satisfies and does something about the pain and life in general. Sometimes people get into addictions because they're bored, life is empty. They want to feel some positive, what they sense like something exciting, some positive feelings. Sometimes that's the problem. Sometimes it's pain that we're trying to sort of suppress and get rid of by using some kind of medication. So this is very important to get to these things and to try to help them to fill up life with the good things. We have this, which I think is a good example. Jesus talks about this. He talks about people who are possessed by demons, and sort of if you get like drive out the demon but doesn't do anything with the empty space, the demon will come back and bring 7 others with them that are worse. And that's what happens if we just try to get rid of the addiction itself. We need to replace and fill up life with something meaningful, something positive that fills those empty spaces or those painful spaces that young people or anyone who gets into an addiction problem has. And just bringing that in also, since we're talking about drugs, alcohol, we know that a big problem today is pornography, and the availability of that. It's so like young children are exposed today to pornographic content, which it's designed to be addictive, but it's extremely destructive. It's as bad as many drugs and other things, and as harmful. And again, we need to work on this, talk with our children about it, like try to put in preventive measures so they don't go there. If you don't talk about it, if you just ignore it, they will probably find it somewhere and they may get hooked on it. So be very intentional with your children. Whatever risks that are out there, talk with them about drugs before they get into it. Talk with them about friends that may not be good to them and that they can get into groups that are bad. Talk with them about pornography. Talk about with internet addiction, social media, how they manage all these things. Don't just sort of wait until there is a problem, but do something about it beforehand. It's much better to prevent something than trying to solve a problem when it has already become significant.
Yes, and it sounds like intentionality.
Yes.
Being intentional. Someone in my family has a mental illness. What are the chances that I will go through that as well?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. It depends on several things. We know some kinds of mental illness has probably a somewhat more genetic component than others and puts and more at risk. But it's a risk, like some kinds, it can be a higher risk, but it doesn't mean that you will have it. And that's when all these other aspects, and for example, lifestyle, relationships, spirituality, if you're worried that you might be vulnerable to that, which we all are, we all can get mental illness. If things are difficult, challenging, like none of us are immune to mental illness. So we all are in that sense at risk, and some are more at risk than others. Risk factors like genetics can be one of those things. A difficult family context and experiences can be another risk factor. And some of these things that are beyond our control, we can't really, we're not in control of our genes. If we do the right things, we can still like modify what we call about now. In recent years, we talk about epigenetics. So like having a gene doesn't say that you will have a problem. Your lifestyle and how you live life actually can impact whether or not that gene is turned off or on or off. So there are many things that we still can do to protect us, even if we genetically are disposed. It has proven to be very difficult, all this genetic research that we have done on mental illness. We thought sort of that all the answers would be in the genes when we started to be able to to map our genes and everything. We thought, well, we couldn't predict everything, and then we realized things are much more complicated than that. So from there we have developed all the epigenetics that we understand, sort of whether or not actually genes are expressed or not. That depends on so many factors. And there's so many things we can do to protect ourselves also. But for all of us, like practicing these principles on how to live good lives, but that I think we have in the Bible, the principles that we have, those really make a difference. And they not just only protect us on our physical health, but so much also on our mental health. But then if we find that we are struggling, then seek help for it. Just as you would do, like if I would get cancer, I would go to the hospital, I would go to the doctor and get help. If I have diabetes, I would seek a professional who could give appropriate treatment for that. If I break a leg, I don't just try to fix it myself. I go to a professional, and it's just as important when it comes to mental health to seek professional help for it. Because it has to do so much with our lives and our ability to enjoy life and live a full life and a productive life.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, let's see. What resources can we tap into to help our youth? Is there an SDA website, or do we have materials that we can get?
Yes. And now I will pull up a slide that I had at the end of my presentation, that I will give you some websites that I can recommend. So if I can share my screen, if that works. Can you see this, or does
yes
this work? It looks like it's sort of, you don't see everything. There, yes, good. Here are some recommendations, both Adventists and non-Adventist websites that I really would recommend, where you can find resources. We have an initiative we call Mental Health Initiative, that my department, in collaboration with youth ministries, family ministries, and education, have done, where we have put on many resources. If you go to this website, youthaliveportal.org, and on the top you'll find the banner Mental Health. There you will find many resources. It's sort of a lot, takes some time to look through that website, because there's a lot there, and some things may be lost in a way, but drown in the many things. But look at that. The North American Division, Youth and Young Adult Ministries, they have a website where they have very good resources, and also some booklets on mental health that are designed specifically for teens and young adults, where they talk about anxiety, talk about depression, talk about suicide, self-harm, and also like how we can do things with it. It's freely available, so go there. Another good resource is what's called the Uncertainty Project. That's also an Adventist resource, where they have various videos that talk about various aspects of how we deal with uncertainties in life. This was interestingly a project that was thought, or they came up with it before the pandemic, but I think it's been so important and relevant in the pandemic. Because there have been so many uncertainties that people have struggled with. A non-Adventist research, which is still very good, it's called Mental Health First Aid Guidelines. It's an Australian organization that has sort of gone international, and at their Australian website, they had these guidelines on various kinds of issues: depression, anxiety, eating disorders, suicide, all kinds of issues that people may be struggling. And also they have resources depending on what kind of part of the world one is in, like how to deal, and this is deal with things. And this is not for health professionals. This is like for anyone. And the idea is like mental health first aid, like general first aid. That's something that all of us should be skilled in so that we can provide. So this is very much resources that are designed to educate like us in general on how we can help and support and talk with people. So this is very good resource if you are a parent, if you are a teacher, if you are a health professional, also if you want to understand like how do I actually deal with these things, what should I do, how can I support, and also it's if you are struggling yourself, there can be good guidelines there. And then what I mentioned briefly, we have working on various resources, a lot of video material discussing mental health issues called Reminded. The website is reminded.org. We don't have published yet. It's sort of still in development, but this is coming. So next year, we really look forward to provide what we think will be very good resources from an Adventist perspective, but it's not designed only for Adventists. This is something we have designed so that it can be relevant for as many people as possible and can really be helpful to many people. So those are some resources that I would recommend to check out.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who are listening and viewing, know that this will be on our Facebook and our YouTube pages, so you can go back if you forget those resources and check those out. So now we have another question. I'm just going to combine two. How can we help our friends that are suicidal? And let's see, where did it go? Oh, is it alarming to have suicidal thoughts?
Oh, very good. Those are very good questions. And I'll start with the last one. Like I said, and just some statistics. When we talk about suicidal thoughts, that's very common, actually, and I think many people have experienced that at some point in life, to just wonder, well, do I actually want to keep on living? That's not in itself necessarily alarming. There are many stages from there until people actually are really at risk. Like most of my patients had thoughts about suicide. Very rare that I would have patients that would not ever had thought about it, but very few actually attempt suicide. I had in my career, I had one patient who actually attempted suicide. I saw hundreds, maybe thousands of patients who actually had thoughts about suicide, but very few tried to do something. So just statistics, if we say that there's 1 billion people who are actually struggling with mental illness, but there's less than 1 million per year who die to suicide, then you see that there's sort of less than 1 in 1,000 of those who struggle with mental illness who will actually die to suicide per year. That may be sort of comforting on one level, but still we need to take that very serious. The ones who actually, because we want to prevent that people die to suicide. What we know is that suicide attempts are, of course, they're more common. For every suicide, there may be something like 20, 30, 40 people who attempt suicide. Some more serious attempts than others. Others may do something and then they regret, and then they get help before it goes that long that it becomes fatal. One thing I would like to say often that, and for someone thinking maybe about suicide and considering, is that the way I see it and my experience is that most people who have suicidal thoughts actually don't want to die. That's not what they really want, but they don't want to suffer anymore. Some of you may be familiar with the Golden Gate Bridge, seen pictures of this red bridge in San Francisco. And it's a tall bridge, and many people have jumped from the bridge in order to do a suicide or die to suicide. And the thing is, like, some people have jumped and actually survived. I don't know how many now. I think it's 60 meters or something. It's very high. So chances that you will die if you jump is very high. But there's actually been people who have survived, and a study that was done. It may sound sort of a bit strange, but they chose to connect with these people who had jumped and survived and ask them this question: what did you think on the way down? There's a very few seconds from people jump till they hit the water. And I think they found about 20 people who had actually survived, and all but one of these people, 19 of these, said they had instant regret after they jumped. They said the thought on the way down was, I shouldn't have done this. I hope I survive. And like every time I think about it and tell about it, I get chills because it's so painful to think that, and I think this is relevant, that many people who attempt and also succeed at suicide, they actually don't want to die, and they may have instant regrets. And that's something to think about also as we talk about it. And I tell these stories to also discourage people, because it's like suicide is no good way out of the pain. It really isn't. That like do something else. There's always other things that can be done. But sometimes when things are the darkest, when we are in the most of despair, that's when these thoughts are the strongest. But like we should always look for other ways out. And could you just repeat the first question just so I get it correctly?
How can we help?
Yes.
Our friends?
What is talk about it? That's the first thing. Like even for me, like as a psychiatrist in the training, I had to learn how to talk about these things. It's uncomfortable to bring it up. It can be sort of difficult. How do you sort of ask someone or talk about having suicidal thoughts? My sort of what I came down to is like, keep it simple. Ask directly. Don't sort of beat around the bush, as we would say in English. I would say sort of my question was sort of, have you ever had, or do you have in any way thoughts about being dead or killing yourself? Like doing it like in a straightforward way, not aggressive. That's important. Not in a critical way, because you want that conversation to be a safe one, where it's clear that you were there to help, you care, you want to support. But just talk about it in a straightforward way. Don't sort of wrap it in so it's sort of unclear what are you getting at, but ask directly, so you can have a frank conversation. It's probably more difficult for you to ask than it may be for the other one to actually open up and talk about it. So be direct, and then have time, take time. Don't panic if someone sort of admits and tells you that they're actually having these thoughts, because then you are in a good position to help and support if they are opening up and are telling about that. So ask sort of, is it only thoughts? Are you having any plans? Like, are you sort of really seriously considering this, or are these just sort of thoughts that come into your mind occasionally? If it's sort of just something that comes occasionally, not really strong, then sort of it's not necessarily like it's not necessarily a high risk at the moment. But if these are coming in as strong feelings, strong impulses, then it really needs to be taken serious. If people have sort of gone to the level where they're sort of thinking about how they would do it, they have like a plan. If they have means for how to do it, say they have medication, they have weapons, they say if they're considering, like the thought is that maybe they would hang themselves if they have a rope, that kind of things. If it's on that level, then action is absolutely necessary. And then you need to work with the person to keep them safe on this. They should then get the help of a professional. That is very important. Don't deal with this just on your own. Friends and family who are in a position where they can be helpful should know and be helpful and supportive. And they should also do whatever can be done to get rid of whatever means that are available. That's medication, it's drugs, it's guns, it's weapons, whatever it is. Get rid of the things by which they could harm themselves. But the important thing is don't take it seriously. That is, and then work with the individual on how to keep them safe, because deep down, people want to keep living, but they want to solve the problems that they are experiencing and want to get out of the pain that they are suffering from.
So doctor, when you mentioned that you need to take some action, what kind of action are you talking? I know I worked at a hospital, and I know when we hear those things, that they have a plan and that they have the materials necessary, we automatically call 911, or we call other professionals and have them taken to the hospital. Are we talking about that, or what actions?
Well, I would say it's whatever is necessary to keep the individual safe. And if there's a high risk, or not, and I would say don't take it upon yourself to assess what is a high risk. That's the job of a professional. And even for us as professionals who are trained in this, we acknowledge it's very difficult actually to assess how high the risk is. So if there is a significant risk, if you are worried, if you don't feel that this is safe, then we need to take action. And that's where also it may be necessary to go against the will of the individual in order to keep them safe. That's what we have by law, the right to do that. Individual freedom and liberty is very strong and protected in most societies and countries. So we can't do things in general against people's will, but when there is an imminent risk of danger to the individual or to other people, then we have by law and something the duty also to do something. There's a moral duty, and in many cases there's a legal duty to take action and do something. And that can be to call the police, it can be to call a health professional. Try to do it in the way that is most acceptable to the individual, and that is sort of the least dramatic. But if nothing else works, you have to resort to the dramatic things, and even physically on your own, do whatever is necessary to keep them safe until someone else can get involved and help you with the situation. So this is just important. We do whatever we can to prevent that someone dies to suicide. They may not be appreciative of it in the moment. They may be so desperate in the moment that they don't think clearly. They may be so ill in the moment that they don't understand what is for their own best. but this is where we have to be community and have to be loving and caring, and that sort of means sometimes we have to also do things that may not be appreciated in the moment.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Okay, a few more. How can we advise our children and our young adults who are worried of not coping with their studies?
Well, this is, I think, children and teens, young adults can be under a lot of stress. And we have to acknowledge that stress is very real. And there's so many things going on at the same time, often like the transition from childhood to adulthood, from the independence and safety, hopefully safety of the home, to becoming an independent person that ventures out into the big world. It's a challenging time, and that's why we also see much of this spike in mental health challenges for teens and young adults. When they are stressed, I think with this and worried about not coping, again, it comes down to talking about things and figuring out, seeing how can things be managed. And sort of there's no simple formula for that. It depends, like every person's situation is very different. So sometimes it can be excessive stress, can be performance anxiety for various kinds of reasons. It can be that the pressures are too big. Sometimes there's a culture at school. It can be that kind of things that just is difficult to deal with. It can be that the child also doesn't sort of maybe are trying to do something that they're not the most talented in doing, that's not their thing. And then it's important to allow the child to go in the directions and be the best possible with the talents and skills that they have. Sometimes parents can put a lot of pressure on children into becoming something that maybe the parents want them to be, but that the child doesn't really want and desire for themselves. And this is very important. When we love and care for our teens and young adults, it's not our wishes and desires for them necessarily that are the best for them. We need to help them to grow into becoming the best possible people, that based on what they want in life and what skills and talents they have been given by God. So there are many sources, potential sources of stress for teens and young adults, and we have to admit sometimes as caregivers, as parents, sometimes we are actually the problem. And we have to face up to that. Also, we are there to help, protect, and support them. But there is no perfect parent. That's just a reality. As parents, we're all fail or at least flawed or imperfect on some level. And we have to be honest and listen when children, teens, sort of start to also speak and maybe react to some of things we also should be open and willing to listen to that and don't dismiss that. So it's a very interesting, it's a challenging time, but very rich time if one can like really be in this together as parents, as uncles, aunts, friends, family, whoever we are in the role we have, like to really be supportive.
Okay, and it sounds like that listening component is extremely important. That's at the base of everything. We see signs, we see symptoms, and we're not really sure until we can listen sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's sort of I come back to that all the time, but that's so essential, and that's why it's sort of a main component in basically all treatments. Also, is if it's like no treatment works well without listening, and parenting without listening doesn't work well. Also, in every aspect of life, we need to listen to one another and be open to the experience of the other.
Okay, now there's two I'm going to try to combine. And there's some signs and symptoms. Is bedwetting and having nightmares related to stress or mental illness? And is teeth grinding while sleeping related? And if so, how and what can we do about it?
Yeah, and these are things that can be indications that something is going on. Especially we are especially concerned like about bedwetting issues. We see that with children. Again, it comes back to this challenge that children doesn't have like their frontal lobe, their thinking part of the brain, their awareness part of the brain isn't fully developed until we're 25 years old, and we're starting to move that even that maybe it's closer to when we become 30 years old, that the thinking part of the brain actually is fully developed. Before that, very much things are happening on a physical and emotional level. And bedwetting, for example, can be an indication of stress in various ways, and that needs, when that is a problem, then it needs to be sort of dealt with and try to figure out what is going on. And that's when also we think that it should include, as parents, like also the help of professionals, which can sort of give advice. You can talk with the child or even the teen about these issues. Nightmares can be an indication, like some people are more prone to nightmares than others. It can be an indication of stress, it can be an indication of trauma, but it isn't necessarily that. But it can be an indication of greater vulnerability to that. Teeth grinding, I must admit, I'm not sure. Actually, like we know that when people are stressed, that they like tension in the jaw, teeth grinding can be a symptom. But some people just do it for other reasons also that are not necessarily related to a mental health issue. But again, explore it whenever there is sort of something going on that is a problem. Try to explore it. And if it is sort of causing problems, then get the help of a professional also, who might be able to assess and explore deeper in a more qualified way than what you may be able to do. So there's some thoughts on those issues.
Okay, thank you. What about tantrums? What's the most common reason for tantrums between children 2 and 5?
Well, here I must give my disclaimer. I'm an adult psychiatrist. That's my expertise. I have never worked with patients younger than 18, and I'm also not a parent, so I don't have that qualification either, unfortunately. But tantrums is, in many ways, we see it as can be a normal phase of development. Also, so it's normal, can be normal to have tantrums. I have some good friends now who have a 2-year-old daughter, and she has some quite significant tantrums. I think she's developing very well, but she's learning also that she has a will, that she has and sort of she can say yes or no. And the challenge is But before, the good thing is, as we start, children develop like language, can express things. They can start to talk about things. But before that skill and ability and language is developed, they are acting out things. Crying is a way of communication. Tantrums is a way of communication. It may not be that it is sort of anything that is pathological or reason for concern, but again, need to sort of be sensitive, like what's going on, what is the child trying to communicate in this situation, and be responsive to what's like that. Again, the tantrum may be the tip of the iceberg, what's underneath, what's behind it. And that's where we need to be sensitive as parents, as caregivers. If this becomes really excessive, then again, it's time to seek advice and counsel. Talk with some other parent who may be experienced. I think this is especially important when someone is a new parent. Like the challenge, the way we live today is that we often live in a way that is sort of quite isolated. In the past, we would maybe more live in tribes, in villages, where we had family, we had generations surrounding us. That's not the way many of us live in the culture today. We're like, can even be like single parents, can be like a small nucleus family, mother, father, child, children, but not with the support and the experience of the larger community around. And that's where it becomes important to create that kind of community. As a parent, you should have someone to mentor you. If you are in that situation, don't do it all by yourself. If you have parents, the ones who are grandparents, if they can provide mentorship, coaching, advice, make use of that. If you don't have it available there, make use of someone else. That's just like, as a therapist, I always made sure that I had someone to mentor me in the situation, because difficult, challenging things come up, and I don't trust myself to manage everything on my own. And sometimes my own reactions may be in a way to whatever's happened, is that my own stuff is being triggered. And that's what very much happens as parents also, that it may be triggering when the child is having a tantrum. Maybe that triggers your own tantrums or your own strong reactions that may not be appropriate or beneficial in the situation. And that's where having someone to talk with, to support you, to think out loud with about what's going on can be very important.
Thank you, Doctor. Well, our time is running down, so I'm going to take just a few more questions, and then we'll have to end. I know that we started late, so I'm hoping that the audience will be able to understand. So my next question is, most of the time, I think of hurting the person I'm angry at and having to think bad things to them. Is that a sign of mental illness, and how can I deal with it?
No, I would not say that it's a sign of mental illness. And it's a very good thing that you are aware of it. That is where, that's the first step in being able to manage it and to deal appropriately with it. That you acknowledge, this is happening, this is what I'm feeling. Feelings and impulses in themselves are not necessarily bad or evil or even sinful. Like, we all have these things that come up. The question is, what do we do with it? That is the important question. I think I read this, I don't remember where, or I heard someone say that you haven't really loved someone until you have had thoughts about strangling the person. This is sort of an extreme way. This is said with humor, but this is what like happens when we are in close relationships with someone. Strong emotions can come up, and also strong negative emotions can come up, strong reactions. Sometimes, and this can have, like sometimes it's because of the behavior that the other one is so difficult in the moment that it's just sort of, one has strong reactions. I'm not saying that just like that I just thought of strangling someone. That's a joke in a way, but it's just sort of putting things like an extreme expression of someone. I'm not recommending that kind of thinking in any way. But sometimes sort of people do things to us, or they do things that are just not good, and then sort of strong reactions are appropriate to that. Sometimes, and that's where we really need to be sensitive. Sometimes it's things in us that are triggered. Sometimes it's our own pain and hurt and maybe trauma from the past that is being triggered, and that we also bring into the situation and react to. Sometimes other people trigger things in us that are really are all the baggage that we have and that we are carrying around, that is being activated and triggered. And it's not appropriate in that kind of situations to act that out on the poor individual who happened to be the trigger for all the pain and suffering that we may be carrying around. So that this is very important to sort of acknowledge that in this, when we are in close relationships, there will be negative emotions. And that's just because we are human beings and we end up hurting each other. That's unfortunately, it's inevitable one way or another. But the important thing is like, how do we do with this? What do we do with this? And again, we come back to talking about things. Like, don't act it out. Talk about it rather than acting out. And being honest, being transparent in a way, sort of, now I feel really hurt. And often like using what the recommendation is, like using the I terminology rather than the you, saying don't go on the attack, but expressing this is what happens to me, this is what I am feeling right now. How do we deal with this? How can we manage this together in a way that can be helpful to both of us, so both of us can get through this? These negative situations like of hurt and pain, they are growth opportunities if they're dealt with appropriately in relationships. I sometimes say, like, in order to have a good relationships, there are two things we must be able to say, and that is I'm sorry and thank you. To be able to acknowledge when things go wrong, when things happen, to be able to say, so I'm sorry that this happened. That's essential. But on the other side, also to be appreciative of the other, to express that is very important. And I think that comes when we have these strong negative reactions in relationships, whether that's romantic relationships, intimate relationships, it's colleagues, it's friends, it's children. One of my best memories of my father was when he apologized to me for having done something that he regretted having done. That's something that I always will treasure, that memory. I don't remember what he had done, but I remember that he came and apologized for what he had done. And that is an essential relationship skill that we all need to practice, to take responsibility when we have hurt one another, when we have harmed one another. Don't blame it on the other, but take responsibility for it. Apologize, say I'm sorry genuinely that I hurt you. I take responsibility. I know I shouldn't have done this. I will try to do better in the future.
Questions left. I mean, we have a lot of questions, but we can only do 2.
Yes.
In this age of technology, how can we help someone who has a computer addiction?
Yeah.
When everything is online.
Yes. It is really a challenge, and I think this for all of us. I don't consider myself addicted, but I get these reports every week of how much time I've spent with a screen, and I don't want to tell you how many hours that is on a daily average. And like, we're not meant for screens. Like, we're not meant to live our lives in front of screens. There are many good things with technology, and I don't think, like, I don't want to say that technology in itself is bad. Technology provides many opportunities, like what we're just doing now. I currently, because of my visa situation, I can't leave the US. Because of the pandemic, all these issues that we have, I can't leave the US, but I can still be with you through technology, and we can share. And we've been able, many of us, I haven't seen my family in person in 2 years in Norway. But I've stayed in touch with them through screen. There are many good things about technology. But the problem is, again, an addiction is usually when there is some kind of unsatisfied need that is there somewhere. I don't really want to talk badly about, say, social media. But I think social media is a challenge because it sort of provides a kind of connection that we all desire and want. But if we don't have it in real life, in real person, face to face, then it can become addictive going to social media. If you don't have an exciting life, an interesting life, and life with good content, going on the internet, being on the computer, surfing, playing computer games, reading news, watching pornography, shopping, all these things that we sort of can do on the internet, it's because it's an indication in most cases that we're lacking something somewhere else in life. And there are, I think, 2 ways to deal with this. We have to restrict the consumption of computer internet the way we do. We have to sort of put some boundaries on that. I have a notification on my phone whenever I get to that I've been 1 hour per day on social media. I get a notification. It's a reminder to myself that, okay, remember you spent quite a lot of time already this day on social media. Maybe it's time to sort of, you should make sure you have time for other things, because that's the problem. Like we can become sucked into the world of internet and computers. It's sort of like a black hole in a way. It pulls us in. It's designed to pull us in. Social media, games, all this. Everything is designed to keep us on. We have to fight and resist it. Otherwise, we are pulled in if we are intentional about putting boundaries. So that's on one side. Then the other side is create something else in life that is so meaningful, that is so attractive, that you actually want to do other things also. I think those are the 2 sort of main strategies that I would recommend. Put some boundaries, restrictions on the negative things, but fill your life with some of those positive things with the help of others. And a strong recommendation, whenever there is some kind of addiction issue, don't fight it alone. It's very hard to fight addictions on your own. You need support from others, a friend, a family member. It can be a professional, it can be a pastor, it can be a counselor, someone who is aware of what you're struggling with, someone who holds you accountable in a supportive way, but someone who can sort of give you advice and help you in the process. So that's the third element in strategy with dealing with addiction. Don't do it alone.
Okay, thank you. And our final question would be, number one, it's a combined question. What is the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist? When would I need one or the other? And what happens if I can't afford them? What do I do?
That's good questions. I'm a psychiatrist and I get this question all the time. What's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist? And often I'm called often, like people call me a psychologist, and I'm fine with that. I don't mind. The difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist is basically a psychiatrist is a medical doctor. A psychiatrist is always a medical doctor who has the general training as a medical doctor, but then has done a specialization in mental health in psychiatry. A psychologist is someone who is trained. They don't have the medical background, but they have been trained specifically from the very beginning in psychology. And sort of you had the third group, like counselors is another group that may not be psychologists, but also been trained not that extensively often in mental health, but still with some training. The recommendation often in many places, it's a general practitioner would be someone who is helpful to ask about give recommendations on what to choose. It may be difficult, like on your own, to decide exactly what you need. You need some professional to give you some counsel on what kind of treatment might be most beneficial. The difference, like the big difference in a way between a psychiatrist and a psychologist is that psychiatrists are able to prescribe medications. Psychologists don't do that. Psychologists works primarily with talk therapy, counseling, talking with patients, that approach. Psychiatrists would be more the ones who can do like physical assessments, assess is there some physical cause that actually is underlying this, because that's a very important thing to assess. When someone is struggling, if it's a depression, anxiety, it can be physical conditions that can actually cause these illnesses or symptoms of anxiety, depression, or other issues. So that needs to be sort of examined closely, because if it's a physical condition, we need to treat the physical condition, and then sometimes the mental condition and symptoms will go away just by treating the physical condition. And that's where a doctor is the right one to talk to. So in many cases, talking with a doctor first, not necessarily going directly to a psychiatrist, but talking with a general practitioner, family doctor, would be a good place to start. Sometimes the psychiatrist would be more focused on medication, on diagnosis, creating treatment plans, and then the psychologist would be giving more the counseling, psychotherapy kind of treatment, if that is what is necessary. The question is sort of, well, and that's a challenge in many places of the world. Well, it's a challenge everywhere in the world, actually, that the availability of mental health treatment is limited. I come from Norway, which I have to say has one of the best health systems in the world, where healthcare basically is free. Still, it was so frustrating because we know so many people don't get the treatment. It's not available, or not enough treatment available who need it. And I know many places in the world, this is much more difficult. What I would recommend is to try to get whatever is available. If you can't see a psychologist, if you can't see a psychiatrist, talk with a doctor, talk with a nurse, talk with a counselor. Sometimes talking with a pastor, a priest, someone who has that kind of background can be helpful. Sometimes talking with someone in your community that you trust and that you respect can be a good option also in this. If you have friends that you trust, pick someone that you see as someone who is sensible, who is wise, and can be a help. Sometimes people who have experienced challenges themselves or struggle themselves with mental health issues can provide good counsel, help, and support. So this is the challenge, so that we may need to make use of whatever is available and the best of what is available. And that is unfortunately the challenge around the world, that the help available often is not perfect. But we have to be intentional about seeking the kind of help that we may be able to get, and take the risk of opening up to people who may not be aware that you're struggling, people who it may feel like you are embarrassed, you may feel ashamed of opening up. But opening up to safe people can be a very good experience, and I recommend it, whether it's a professional or it's someone that you trust and someone you think will care and support you.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor. It's been a blessing to have you and to be able to share and dialogue together. I know that our listening and our viewing audience have been blessed by your ministry. And so without further ado, would you mind having prayer for us?
I would be happy to do that. Yes. Dear Lord, thank you that even though we had some technical challenges in the beginning, it was worked out. Thank you that we prayed to you, and whatever happened, it was able to figure it out. Thank you that we could share, that we could talk. We talked about things that are challenging, that are difficult, that are painful, whether we struggle ourselves or we are close to someone who is struggling, or even if we are at a distance, but we realize that someone is struggling. Lord, we pray for your help, we pray for your guidance, we pray for your courage to reach out to others, to help or to get help when we need that. Lord, we know that everyone, sometimes we live these lives, may look like everyone else is doing well, they're successful, they have their stuff together. Lord, you know that is not the case. You know that we all, every single one of us, do carry things that to a greater or lesser degree are challenging to deal with. We all need kindness, we all need love, we need support, we need to be in community. And that's why you created us to be families, you created us to be in faith communities, churches, not just because we are there to serve others, but we need to be ministered to and help and support. We need one another, Lord, and we need you. And Lord, we pray for everyone now who has been listening. Lord, you know every heart, you know every joy, you know every pain. Lord, bring healing to all of us. That's what we desire. We know things won't be perfect in this world, in this life here. We know that in the future, when your will again reigns supreme in the world, in the universe, in our lives, we know that then there will be no more tears, there will be no more pain, there will be no suffering, there will be no death. But Lord, we're not there yet. And until we get there, Lord, be close to us and help us to be close to one another, so we can have that comfort and that reassurance that we are not alone, because we are not alone. Even if we feel disconnected from other people, you are never far away from us. Help us to spend time with you. Help us to not be distracted by all the things this world has to offer. That may be attractive, that may be distractive, that may be addictive. But Lord, that doesn't provide for what our true needs are, and that does not bring health and healing in the way we need. Lord, help us to live close to you, to stay connected with you, and to stay connected with one another. Lord, there are many things we could pray on. You know our needs. Please add the prayer to our prayers for each and every one of us as we need. Lord, thank you that you care for us. Thank you that you love us. Thank you that we can be your children. Pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dr. Torben. And for those of you who were not here yesterday, if we can put online there sison.org, that is also another resource for Christian therapists. It is not free, but I'm told it's affordable. And so that's another resource that you can tap into. Okay, and so now I just have some final remarks. Yes, we want to thank a lot of people. In order for this program to be as it was, I'd like to thank all of our IT team from the golf field for the wonderful work that they've done in helping to put this program to be live streamed so that you, our viewing audience, could be able to see. I also would like to thank all of those pastors, our pastors who were supportive, our health ministry directors, all across the Gulf who were supportive. Our musicians, our young people, they did a wonderful job, so I want to thank them as well. All of our participants and all of our volunteers. We thank each and every one of you for coming on, and I pray that this weekend was a blessing to you, that this was an opportunity to increase your mental health awareness, and that you receive tools to help to empower you to better mental health. And we have one announcement that's coming up, is our camp meeting. That's coming up October 28th through 30th. And I believe it's going to be an in-person camp meeting. So may God bless you, and until next time, have a happy Sabbath.